a man of God, murdered in the very place where holiness dwelled. But why? This is one of the most shocking stories in the Bible. A faithful priest, someone who spoke for God, was killed, not by strangers, not by enemies, but by his own people. And it happened right inside God's temple. How could something so evil happen in a place so holy? In today's video, we're going to look at the powerful and heartbreaking story of Zechariah, a man who stood up for what was right, even when everyone around him turned away from God. He was a prophet and the son of a priest. Zechariah grew up in the temple, surrounded by worship and the presence of God. He loved the Lord and cared deeply about the people of Judah. But when the people began to rebel and disobey God, Zechariah spoke out. He warned them to return to the right path. He told them that turning away from God would lead to destruction. Instead of listening, the people became angry. They hated the truth, and what they did next was unthinkable. They murdered Zechariah right there in the temple court, God's own house. This story is not just about an ancient murder. It teaches us something deep about the human heart, how pride, sin, and rebellion can lead people to silence the very voices sent to help them. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand the powerful message behind Zechariah's death and why Jesus himself spoke about it centuries later. Zechariah was a special man chosen by God. He was both a priest and a prophet. That means he not only worked in the temple, offering sacrifices and prayers, but he also spoke messages from God to the people. His job was to guide the nation of Judah back to God whenever they went off course. Zechariah was the son of Jehoiada, a faithful and powerful priest who had served for many years. Jehoiada helped bring peace and godliness to the land. He also protected the young king Joash when he was just a child, and helped him become king. Because of Jehoiada's good influence, King Joash started off as a good king who followed God. And Zechariah grew up during this time. He saw what it meant to live in a nation that obeyed the Lord. But after Jehoiada died, things changed. The king started turning away from God. The people followed him. They began worshiping false gods and living in sin. Zechariah saw what was happening. As a prophet, he had to speak the truth, even if it was dangerous. He stood up and warned the people. He reminded them of how God had helped them in the past and told them to return to him. Zechariah cared deeply for the people. He didn't want to see them fall into judgment. But sadly, his honesty and boldness made the leaders angry. Instead of turning back to God, they turned on Zechariah. It's important to remember, Zechariah wasn't just a random voice. He was the son of a respected priest. He was raised in the temple. He had a close relationship with the king. But even that couldn't protect him from what was coming. After the death of Jehoiada, the faithful priest, everything in Judah began to change. When Jehoiada was alive, he helped lead the people to follow God. He gave wise advice to King Joash and made sure that the temple and the worship of the Lord were respected. As long as he was around, things were peaceful, and the people stayed close to God. But when Jehoiada died, the king lost his godly guidance. He started listening to the wrong people, leaders and officials who did not care about God. Slowly, the nation began to turn away from the truth. They stopped worshiping the Lord and began bowing to false idols and gods. They ignored God's commandments and followed their own desires. It was a dark time. People were choosing sin over righteousness. And instead of being corrected, they were encouraged by their leaders to keep going down the wrong path. Zechariah saw all of this happening. He couldn't stay silent. As a prophet of God, he had a duty to speak up. So he boldly stood before the people and the leaders. He warned them, saying, "Because you have turned away from the Lord He has also turned away from you." His words were strong and direct. He didn't hold back. He wasn't trying to be popular. He was trying to wake the people up before it was too late. But instead of repenting, the people grew angry. They didn't want to hear the truth. They felt insulted and offended. Zechariah's bold stand for righteousness put him in great danger. But he stood firm. He spoke for God, even when it meant standing alone. Zechariah knew the people of Judah were doing wrong. They had turned their backs on God. They were worshiping false idols and living in sin. As a prophet, Zechariah could not keep silent. He stood up in front of everyone and spoke a powerful message from God. He said, "Why do you disobey the Lord's commands? You will not succeed, because you have left the Lord. He has also left you." These words cut deep. The people didn't want to hear that. They didn't like being told they were wrong. Instead of feeling sorry and asking for forgiveness, they became angry. Their hearts were hard. They refused to listen. The leaders, the officials, and even the king, who once respected Zechariah's father, now saw Zechariah as a threat. They didn't want to change their ways. They wanted to silence him. So, they made a terrible decision. With the king's approval, they ordered Zechariah to be killed. It happened right in the temple courtyard, the place that was meant to be holy, where people came to pray and worship. The very house of God became the scene of a brutal murder. A group of people picked up stones and began throwing them at Zechariah. He didn't fight back. He didn't run. He stood firm in his faith. And there, in the court of the Lord's house, Zechariah died. As he was dying, he cried out, "May the Lord see this and bring justice." Think about that for a moment. God's prophet, killed in God's house by God's people. It was a heartbreaking act of betrayal. A nation that once loved God had now murdered one of his messengers. And they did it in the very place where they were supposed to honor him. This was more than just a murder. It was a sign that the people's hearts had grown cold. They didn't just reject Zechariah. They rejected the voice of God itself. The murder of Zechariah was not just a tragic death. It was a powerful symbol of how far the people had fallen away from God. He wasn't killed on a battlefield. He wasn't taken by enemies from another nation. Zechariah was killed in the temple, God's own house, by his own people. The temple was supposed to be a place of prayer, worship, and holiness. It was where God's presence dwelled. But instead, it became a place of violence and bloodshed. By killing Zechariah there, the people showed just how much they had rejected God. They didn't just ignore his message, they destroyed the messenger. This act marked a deep spiritual failure for the nation. It was one of the darkest moments in Israel's history. Even Jesus talked about this moment hundreds of years later. In Matthew 23:35, Jesus said, "From the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar." Jesus was reminding the people of how many times they had killed God's prophets. From the very first murder, Abel, to Zechariah, God's people had a long history of rejecting the truth. By mentioning Zechariah, Jesus showed how serious this sin was. It wasn't forgotten. God saw what happened, and it became a warning to future generations. This story is not just about the past. It reminds us today to listen to the truth, even when it's hard. We must never silence the voices that God sends to correct us, because those voices are often the ones trying to save us. Some people get confused about which Zechariah was killed in the temple, because there are a few men named Zechariah in the Bible. In the Old Testament, the prophet who was stoned in the temple was Zechariah, the son of Jehoiada. He was a priest and a prophet, and his story is found in 2 Chronicles 24, 20, 22. He was the one who stood up to the people and was killed in God's house. But in the New Testament, when Jesus talks about this murder in Matthew 23:35, he says, "From the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah." That has led some people to ask, is this a different Zechariah? There is another prophet named Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, who wrote the book of Zechariah, but there is no record in the Bible of him being murdered in the temple. So why does Jesus use the name son of Berechiah? Some Bible scholars believe it could have been a copying error over time in the ancient manuscripts. Others say Jesus may have been referring to both men symbolically, pointing to all the prophets who were killed. However, most Bible teachers agree that Jesus was talking about Zechariah, son of Jehoiada, because his death fits the description perfectly. Murdered in the temple court. In the end, the message is what matters most. The story shows how far people can fall when they reject God's truth. It reminds us that speaking for God can be dangerous, but it is always powerful. No matter the name, the lesson is clear. We must not turn our backs on the truth, especially when it comes from God's messengers. The story of Zechariah may be thousands of years old, but the lesson still speaks to us today. One of the biggest warnings from this story is about the danger of rejecting the truth. Zechariah was sent by God to help the people. He didn't come to harm them. He came to warn them and save them. But instead of listening, they became angry. They didn't want to hear correction. So they silenced him. Even today, many people don't like being told they're wrong. When someone speaks the truth, especially about sin or turning back to God, some people get upset. They ignore it, push it away, or attack the messenger. But when we do that, we're doing the same thing the people in Zechariah's time did. We're silencing God's voice. This story is a message for all of us. Don't reject the truth, even when it's hard to hear. Sometimes God sends people, pastors, friends, even strangers, to speak truth into our lives. If we always block them out, we could be blocking God Himself. For churches and believers today, this is also a wake-up call. Are we open to correction? Are we willing to hear God's voice, even when it challenges us? God's truth isn't always comfortable, but it's always meant to lead us to life. Zechariah's death reminds us that standing for truth takes courage, and listening to truth takes humility. Let's not be like the crowd who picked up stones. Let's be people who open our hearts when God speaks, because when we listen, we grow, and when we obey, we stay close to Him. As we've seen today, Zechariah was a faithful man of God, a prophet who spoke the truth even when it was hard. Sadly, he was silenced by his own people who rejected the very message that could have saved them. His story is a powerful reminder. When we refuse to listen to the truth, we risk falling further away from God. Now let me ask you, are we truly listening to the truth today, or are we silencing it? Are there voices in our lives that we need to pay more attention to? Or are we turning away from what God is trying to say to us? I'd love to hear your thoughts on Zechariah's death and what it means for us today. What do you think the story teaches us? Drop your comments below. I always enjoy reading what you have to say. And if you found this video meaningful, please like it, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss more powerful biblical stories and lessons. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.